War leaves scars that time can never heal. But some scars are deeper, etched into the very soul of the land itself. Tonight, we journey into the blood-soaked fields, abandoned forts, and crumbling ruins where the Civil War raged and where restless spirits still wander. They say history never dies. But what if it refuses to stay buried? What if the echoes of cannon fire, the cries of dying soldiers, and the shadows of the fallen still haunt these grounds? Welcome to the 20 most haunted Civil War sites in the United States, a journey where every battlefield tells a story, every fort hides a secret, and every whisper in the night might be the voice of a soldier long dead. So dim the lights, lock the doors, and listen closely, because some of these spirits don't just haunt the past, they're waiting for you in the present. The rolling fields of Gettysburg seem peaceful today, with green pastures stretching beneath a quiet sky. But in July of 1863, this land bore witness to unimaginable carnage. For 3 brutal days, Union and Confederate forces clashed in what would become the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War. Over 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or went missing, and their agony is said to linger in the soil, in the stones, and in the air itself. It is no wonder that Gettysburg Battlefield has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted places in America. Visitors to the historic site often describe a sense of heaviness as they step onto the fields. The breeze that whispers through the tall grass carries more than the rustle of leaves. It seems to bring echoes of cannon fire and the distant cries of men locked in desperate struggle. Some even claim the atmosphere shifts suddenly, as if time folds back on itself, and the past bleeds into the present. One moment the fields are empty. The next, a haze appears, and within it, the shapes of soldiers emerge, muskets at the ready. Their faces pale and determined. Just as quickly, they vanish into nothing. One of the most infamous areas is Devil's Den, a rocky outcrop that served as a strategic position during the battle. The stones are stained with blood, and countless men died fighting for control of that ground. Modern visitors report strange phenomena there. Disembodied voices whispering from the rocks, the crack of gunfire when no reenactment is taking place, and even full apparitions. Tourists have taken photographs showing spectral figures crouched among the boulders, their gray uniforms and hollow eyes frozen in a moment that ended over 160 years ago. Some hikers say their cameras malfunction near Devil's Den, draining batteries in seconds or erasing images entirely as if something does not want to be captured. Little Round Top, another iconic landmark, is equally haunted. This hill was the site of a desperate Union defense that turned the tide of the battle. It is here that some claim to encounter a mysterious soldier who seems eerily out of place. Wearing a ragged uniform and speaking in a low, urgent voice, he warns visitors to hold this ground before vanishing into thin air. Paranormal investigators have spent nights on the slopes of Little Round Top, capturing chilling EVP recordings, faint shouts of charge and fire, echoing from the darkness when no living soul was near. Then there are the phantom sounds that drift across the fields at dusk, the thunder of cannon fire, the crack of rifles, the rumble of distant drums. Some say they have smelled the acrid scent of gunpowder or the coppery tang of blood in the still evening air. Others report hearing the anguished cries of the dying pleas for water, groans of pain, and voices calling for mothers, wives, and sweethearts they would never see again. These sounds come without warning, startling those who walk the trails alone after sunset. By the time they look around, the fields are empty, silent, and shrouded in an eerie calm. Perhaps the most unsettling encounters are those involving entire phantom regiments. Multiple witnesses have claimed to see columns of soldiers marching through the morning mist, muskets on their shoulders, flags fluttering as if in a spectral breeze. They move with precision, their boots making no sound on the earth, their faces expressionless. Some tourists have even waved or spoken to these figures, mistaking them for Civil War reenactors, only to watch them fade like smoke before their eyes. These ghostly armies are said to appear most often near Pickett's Charge, the site of a doomed Confederate assault that cost thousands of lives in mere minutes. The energy left behind by such slaughter seems impossible to erase, Gettysburg is not just haunted by soldiers, nurses, field doctors, and civilians who perished during those bloody days are also said to wander the town and surrounding farms. The old homes that served as makeshift hospitals carry their own spectral signatures, footsteps pacing empty rooms, phantom cries from long-forgotten patients, and the faint clinking of surgical instruments in the dead of night. The Farnsworth House Inn, once a Confederate sharpshooter's post, is infamous for its restless spirits. Guests report doors opening on their own, whispers in darkened hallways, and cold spots that linger no matter how warm the season. What makes Gettysburg so chilling is not just the volume of paranormal activity, but the weight of sorrow that hangs over the land. This was not just a battle, it was a human tragedy on an unimaginable scale. Young men who believed in causes greater than themselves met violent ends far from home, their dreams extinguished in an instant. Many believe their spirits linger because they cannot let go of that unfinished fight, or because they seek recognition, a final salute before they fade into history. Modern ghost hunters and historians alike are drawn to Gettysburg because it is a place where time seems fragile, where the veil between the living and the dead is paper-thin. Some come seeking evidence of the afterlife, armed with cameras, recorders, and thermal imaging devices. Others simply come to feel the weight of history, to stand where thousands fell, and honor their memory. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, few leave Gettysburg untouched. The silence feels alive, the shadows seem longer, and the air carries whispers of a battle that refuses to be forgotten. To walk the fields of Gettysburg is to walk among echoes of gunfire, of battle cries, of human voices lost to time. And if you listen closely, when the sun dips below the horizon and the mist begins to rise, you may hear them too. The marching feet, the distant drums, and the haunting call of soldiers who never came home. The quiet farmlands of Shopsburg, Maryland, hide a grim secret beneath their rolling hills. Today, the Antietam Battlefield is a solemn memorial to the men who fought and died there. But on September 17, 1862, it became the scene of the bloodiest single day in American military history. In just 12 hours of relentless combat, over 23,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or declared missing. The fields were choked with smoke, the air thick with the roar of cannon fire and the screams of the dying. That kind of suffering does not fade easily, and many believe it has stained the land forever. Those who visit Antietam often speak of a strange heaviness that descends as they walk the historic grounds. The feeling is strongest at a place known as Bloody Lane, a sunken farm road that became a death trap for thousands of Confederate soldiers. Union troops poured down a storm of musket fire and artillery shells onto the men who held that position. For hours, the lane ran red with blood, the bodies of soldiers stacked so high that survivors used them as shields. The ground drank deep of their agony, and even now, more than a century and a half later, that anguish seems to linger. Visitors who walk along Bloody Lane describe an unsettling quiet, broken by whispers carried on the wind. Some hear faint voices calling out commands, "Hold the line," or the muffled groans of men in pain. Others report the rhythmic roll of phantom drumbeats echoing across the fields, as if a spectral army were still preparing for battle. There are those who have heard the eerie strains of fife and drum music drifting from the tree line, fading away when they draw closer. The apparitions seen along Bloody Lane are among the most chilling. People have spotted uniformed soldiers pacing the sunken road, their faces pale and eyes hollow, muskets slung over their shoulders. They appear for just a moment before dissolving like mist in the morning sun. Paranormal investigators have captured unexplained shadows on camera and recorded voices through EVP sessions, some whispering names, others repeating fragments of battlefield orders. One investigator reported hearing a clear, disembodied shout of "charge" in an empty field, followed by the distant sound of marching feet. Another hotspot of ghostly activity is Burnside's Bridge, where Union troops fought fiercely to cross Antietam Creek against entrenched Confederate defenders. The bridge became a bottleneck of slaughter, its stones slick with blood. Visitors claim to feel icy fingers brush against their arms as they stand near the water. and some have seen ghostly shapes darting through the woods. At night, a dense fog often rolls in, and within it, witnesses report shadowy figures moving along the bank, soldiers who seem to melt away when approached. There are even accounts of gunfire cracking through the night air, followed by sudden, unnatural silence. Sharpsburg itself bears its share of haunting. Many of the homes that stood during the battle were converted into makeshift hospitals. Civilians worked desperately to save the wounded, but for many, death came slowly and in agony. These old buildings are said to echo with phantom footsteps and the soft cries of men who never left. One historic home, Pry House, served as Union General George McClellan's headquarters and later as a field hospital. People touring the house have felt sudden cold spots, heard doors creak open on their own, and even smelled the sharp, metallic scent of blood when no source could be found. What makes Antietam so unnerving is the sense that the past is not gone, it's waiting, just beneath the surface. Many who visit feel as though they're being watched, as if unseen eyes follow their every step. Some experience sudden waves of sorrow or nausea while standing in certain spots, especially along Bloody Lane. Sensitive visitors speak of hearing phantom cries in the distance, pleas for water, final prayers, or voices calling for loved ones who would never come. Stories abound of entire phantom regiments appearing in the mist, marching in formation across the fields. At dawn, when the fog clings low to the earth, witnesses have reported the silhouettes of soldiers emerging from the haze, their bayonets glinting like shards of light. They move silently, their faces grim, before vanishing without a trace. In one particularly chilling account, a visitor thought he had encountered a group of reenactors in Confederate gray. He waved to them, but they ignored him. Moments later, they dissolved into the mist before his eyes. The energy of that day in 1862 seems to have imprinted itself on Antietam. Paranormal researchers believe the sheer scale of violence, fear, and anguish left behind a powerful psychic residue. The ground here soaked up not only the blood of thousands, but their last desperate thoughts and emotions. It is said that on quiet evenings, when the sun sinks low and the fields glow with fading light, the air hums with something unseen, a vibration of sorrow and rage that refuses to die. Some come to Antietam seeking history, others come chasing ghosts, but nearly everyone leaves with a story, a feeling, or a memory that defies explanation. Whether it's the sound of phantom drum beats rolling across the fields, the sight of a lone soldier pacing Bloody Lane, or the oppressive silence that settles like a shroud, there is no denying the battlefield holds more than the relics of war. It holds the restless spirits of men whose lives were cut short in a single, savage day, a day that echoes still in the haunted heart of Maryland. The Shiloh Battlefield in southern Tennessee is a place of quiet reflection today, its rolling fields and shaded woods belying the horror that once swept through them. In April of 1862, this tranquil landscape was transformed into a killing ground during one of the first major battles of the Civil War. Over 2 days, Union and Confederate forces clashed in a storm of fire and steel that left more than 23,000 men dead, wounded, or missing. The ground ran red, the air was thick with smoke and the cries of the dying, and the echoes of that carnage still seemed to linger among the trees. One area of the battlefield remains especially infamous: the Hornet's Nest. This shallow, sunken road became the focus of the fighting on the first day of battle. Union troops held their position here against repeated Confederate assaults, and the gunfire was so intense, so constant, that survivors said it sounded like a swarm of angry hornets. For 7 brutal hours, wave after wave of Southern soldiers threw themselves at the Union line, and the slaughter was unimaginable. When the fighting finally ended, the ground was choked with bodies. Men lay stacked in heaps, their blood soaking into the earth. It was a scene from hell, and some believe that hell never truly left. Those who walk the Hornet's Nest today often speak of a strange energy in the air, a feeling of heaviness that presses down like an unseen weight. Many claim to hear sounds that should be impossible: the sharp crack of musket fire, the rattle of volleys echoing across the fields, and the muffled thud of cannon fire rolling in from the distance. Even though the cannons fell silent more than a century and a half ago, On still nights, when the wind dies and the park is cloaked in darkness, these phantom sounds become even more chilling. Some visitors report sudden bursts of gunfire erupting from the woods, followed by eerie silence, as if the ghosts of Shiloh are fighting the battle all over again. The apparitions that haunt this place are as unnerving as the sounds people have seen. Figures in ragged blue and gray uniforms moving through the mist, muskets in their hands, their faces pale and expressionless. They march in formation across the fields, only to fade away like smoke. Others have encountered lone soldiers, standing rigid among the trees, staring into nothing with hollow eyes. Approach them, and they vanish without a trace. Paranormal investigators have captured strange anomalies on film near the hornet's nest, shifting shadows where no one stands, glowing orbs floating above the ground, and sudden flashes of light in the darkness. The hornet's nest is not the only haunted corner of Shiloh. Pittsburgh Landing, where the Union Army regrouped after the first day's slaughter, has its share of spectral phenomena. During the battle, the Tennessee River turned crimson as bodies floated downstream, carried away by the current. Today, some visitors claim to hear splashes echoing from the still waters when no one is near. Others describe voices drifting across the river, faint and desperate, as if men are still calling for rescue that will never come. The Shiloh National Cemetery, resting on a bluff overlooking the river, holds the remains of thousands who perished here. At night, this hallowed ground takes on an even more somber atmosphere. People walking among the headstones have reported flickering lights weaving through the graves, like lanterns carried by unseen hands. Footsteps crunch softly on the gravel paths when no living soul is near. Some visitors have even glimpsed full apparition silent sentinels, standing watch over the dead, their faces lost in shadow. One chilling account tells of a visitor who saw a soldier leaning against a headstone, his uniform torn and bloodstained. When she blinked, he was gone. The sounds of war are the most common reminders of Shiloh's haunted legacy. Bugle calls have been heard echoing through the trees, their mournful notes fading into the night. The rhythmic beat of phantom drums sometimes rolls across the fields, as if summoning troops for a battle that ended long ago. Rangers on overnight duty have told of hearing the distant rumble of artillery, growing louder before vanishing into silence. Some describe the faint smell of black powder hanging in the air, sharp and acrid, though no shots have been fired in more than 160 years. Those who study the paranormal believe the sheer magnitude of suffering at Shiloh left an indelible mark on the land. For 2 days, men endured unimaginable terror, pain, and chaos. Many died far from home, their last thoughts filled with fear and longing. That emotional energy, some say, soaked into the soil, replaying itself in spectral fragments that linger like a scar. Others believe the spirits of the dead remain because they cannot accept the futility of their sacrifice. Forever trapped on the ground they bled to defend. Not all of the battlefield's ghosts are soldiers. Civilians who perished in the chaos are said to roam the land as well. Some have seen the figure of a woman in a tattered dress moving slowly through the trees near the river, her head bowed in grief. Legend says she is the spirit of a local woman searching for her husband among the dead, her sorrow binding her to this cursed place. Those who visit Shiloh come seeking history, but many leave with something else, an experience they cannot explain. They carry away the sound of a bugle's call lingering in their ears, or the memory of a shape glimpsed in the corner of their eye. Their one moment, gone the next. Some speak of an unshakable sadness that clings to them long after they leave, as if the spirits of the fallen have brushed against their soul. Stand at the hornet's nest on a moonlit night and listen. You may hear the rattle of musket fire in the distance, the thunder of cannons rolling across the hills, or the cries of men who never left this ground. And if you feel a chill sweep through you, or see a flicker of movement in the shadows, remember, Shiloh is more than a battlefield. It is a graveyard of restless spirits, a place where the past refuses to die, and where the echoes of war still shake the earth on quiet Tennessee nights. The Chickamauga Battlefield in northern Georgia is a place of solemn remembrance, its grassy fields and dense woodlands hiding echoes of one of the Civil War's most horrific engagements. In September 1863, Union and Confederate forces clashed here for 2 bloody days, leaving more than 34,000 men dead, wounded, or missing. The carnage was overwhelming. Bodies carpeted the earth, and the groans of the dying filled the night air. Today, the battlefield stands as a memorial, but it is said that some who fell here never left. Among the many ghostly legends tied to Chickamauga, none is more chilling than that of Old Green Eyes. Old Green Eyes is the name given to a mysterious, glowing-eyed entity that has haunted these woods for over a century. Witnesses describe it as an inhuman figure, often seen stalking through the trees at night, its eyes burning with an eerie green light. Some say it walks upright, cloaked in shadow, while others claim it moves on all fours like a beast. Its presence is accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread, and those who have encountered it speak of fear so deep it defies explanation. The origins of Old Green Eyes are shrouded in mystery. One popular legend says it was once a Confederate soldier who lost his head to cannon fire. His spirit, consumed by rage and sorrow, searches the battlefield for his missing body. Another tale suggests Old Green Eyes is something far older than the War of Dark, ancient being that lurked in these hills long before the first shot was fired. Whatever the truth, the stories share one detail: its glowing green eyes piercing the darkness, watching from the shadows as night falls over Chickamauga. Modern visitors to the park have reported unnerving encounters. Drivers traveling the lonely roads that wind through the battlefield at night often glimpsed green orbs gleaming from the tree line, like lanterns hovering in midair. Some watch in shock as the lights move closer, revealing a tall, hunched figure with a face too twisted to be human. In a flash, it vanishes into the woods, leaving behind only the pounding of their hearts. Others claim to have seen Old Green Eyes racing alongside their cars, keeping pace with impossible speed before darting away into the darkness. Hikers who linger too long after sunset speak of rustling leaves and snapping twigs, as though something heavy moves through the underbrush just beyond sight. They feel eyes on them, glowing and unblinking, and hear the soft crunch of footsteps circling their position. When they turn on their flashlights, nothing is there, but the feeling of being hunted does not fade. Some have even reported low growls rumbling from the shadows, sending them fleeing toward the safety of their vehicles. While Old Green Eyes is the most famous spirit of Chickamauga, it is far from the only one. The battlefield hums with spectral activity, as if the violence of those 2 days left an imprint too strong to erase. Visitors have heard the clash of phantom muskets and the distant roar of cannons echoing across the fields. The rhythmic beat of drums sometimes rolls through the trees, followed by the faint strains of bugle calls from an army long gone. On still nights, the air itself seems to vibrate with the memory of battle-ghostly volleys cracking through the darkness, accompanied by the anguished cries of men who never made it home. The most haunted areas of the battlefield are often the bloodiest. Snodgrass Hill, where Union forces made their desperate stand, is a hotspot for paranormal encounters. People walking the trails after dark report shadowy figures crouching among the rocks, their features obscured by smoke that is no longer there. Others hear whispered voices pleading for water, or the ragged breaths of men in their final moments. The horses that carried soldiers into battle are said to linger as well. There are accounts of spectral hoofbeats thundering through the forest, though no living animal can be found. In the fog that sometimes blankets the fields at dawn or dusk, entire phantom regiments have been seen marching silently across the land. Witnesses describe long lines of soldiers materializing from the mist, their bayonets gleaming faintly in the dim light. They move with mechanical precision, eyes fixed ahead, before fading like smoke on the wind. Some who encounter these apparitions mistake them for reenactors until they vanish without a sound. The Chickamauga Creek itself carries eerie tales. Fishermen and wanderers along its banks have heard splashes and shouts echoing from the water, as though men were still crossing under fire. One story tells of a spectral hand reaching up from the creek, pale and dripping, before sinking beneath the surface without a ripple. Despite these countless reports, it is Old Green Eyes that draws the most fear. Some believe it feeds on the lingering energy of the battlefield, growing stronger with each retelling of its legend. Others think it guards the dead, a grim sentinel ensuring that the restless spirits remain bound to the soil they bled upon. Whatever it is, those who have looked into its glowing eyes swear the memory will never leave them. The battlefield closes at dusk, but that has not stopped thrill-seekers from venturing out after dark. Some return with trembling voices and pale faces, swearing they saw something move in the woods, something watching, waiting. Others never speak of what they encountered, unwilling to relive the terror. Rangers warn visitors not to linger past closing time, not just for safety, but because of what might be waiting among the trees when night falls. Chickamauga is more than a historic site. It is a place where the past refuses to die, where echoes of war ripple through the present, and where something far older and darker than any soldier still walks beneath the pines. If you find yourself there after sunset, keep your eyes on the shadows. You might just see a pair of green lights flicker in the distance. And if you do, pray they stay far away, because if Old Green Eyes is watching, you may not walk away unchanged. The Stones River Battlefield in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, is a quiet expanse of fields and woodlands, its rolling landscape giving little hint of the nightmare that unfolded here more than a century and a half ago. But on New Year's Eve of 1862, this ground shook with the fury of war. For 3 days, Union and Confederate forces clashed in a brutal struggle that left nearly 24,000 men dead, wounded, or missing. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, and the echoes of that violence seemed to linger still. The fighting began on the final day of the year, as winter gripped the land in a chilling silence. What should have been a time of celebration and hope was instead drowned in blood. The roar of cannon fire shattered the frosty air, mingling with the screams of the wounded and dying. For the soldiers who fought here, the new year brought no promise of peace, only death and despair. Today, the battlefield stands as a memorial, but those who walk its trails after dark say the past is not gone. They claim the spirits of the fallen remain, trapped in an endless cycle of duty and suffering. Visitors often report strange sights in the early morning hours when a low mist blankets the ground. Figures appear in the fogmen in tattered blue and gray uniforms, their faces pale and distant. These spectral soldiers pace slowly across the fields, muskets slung over their shoulders, their eyes scanning the horizon as if awaiting orders that will never come. Some march in single file, others stand motionless like sentries guarding an invisible line. Approach them, and they vanish into the mist without a sound. One of the most haunted places on the battlefield is Hell's Half-Acre, a rocky outcrop where the fighting was savage and unrelenting. Union and Confederate soldiers clashed hand to hand among the jagged stones, their blood soaking into the cold earth. The cries of men locked in mortal combat echoed off the rocks, and the carnage was so intense that survivors spoke of bodies piled like cordwood. Today, people walking among the stones feel a heavy, oppressive energy, as though the ground itself remembers the agony. Some hear whispers drifting through the air, or the muffled clash of bayonets striking steel. Others have captured eerie anomalies on Khmer shapes moving in the background where no one stood, and glowing orbs that hover for an instant before disappearing. Phantom gunfire is another common report. Tourists exploring the battlefield after sunset have heard the sharp crack of musket shots rolling across the fields, followed by distant shouts that rise and fall on the wind. On some nights, the thunder of artillery can be heard booming through the darkness. Though the cannons have been silent for generations, rangers on overnight patrol have experienced the same unnerving sounds, describing sudden volleys erupting from nowhere, only to fade into the stillness, as if the echoes of war refused to die. Perhaps most unsettling are the voices. Paranormal investigators conducting EVP sessions have recorded faint commands, forward, or hold the line, spoken in urgent tones by speakers no longer living. In other instances, the voices sound weary and broken, whispering pleas for water or murmuring prayers to loved ones far away. Some recordings capture nothing but moans and sobs, the raw pain of men who never left the field. Those who hear these sounds with their own ears often describe a chill sweeping through them, a coldness that no amount of warmth can shake. The Stones River itself flows quietly through the battlefield, but even these calm waters hold their share of ghostly legends. During the battle, soldiers fell by the hundreds along its banks, their bodies tumbling into the icy current. Some drowned while trying to cross under fire, their cries for help lost in the roar of musketry. Today, visitors have reported seeing strange ripples disturb the water on windless nights, as if something unseen moves beneath the surface. Others claim to hear splashes echoing from the river, followed by faint, desperate voices calling from the dark. The Stones River National Cemetery, where thousands of soldiers rest beneath rows of white headstones, is another hotspot for paranormal activity. After dusk, lights have been seen flickering among the graves, bobbing like lanterns carried by invisible hands. People walking the paths have felt sudden cold spots, even on warm summer evenings. Some have even encountered shadowy figures moving silently among the stones, vanishing when approached. One chilling account tells of a visitor who saw a lone soldier standing rigid near a headstone, his uniform ragged and his face obscured. When she blinked, he was gone. Many believe the sheer horror of the battle imprinted itself on the land. For 3 days, soldiers endured hunger, exhaustion, and the terror of death, and countless men fell without ever seeing another sunrise. That anguish, some say, seeps from the soil and drifts through the trees, replaying itself in spectral fragments for those sensitive enough to notice. The battlefield becomes a stage for an eternal tragedy, where ghostly actors march and fight under an unseen sky. Those who visit Stones River today come to honor history, but many leave with more than they expected. They carry with them the sound of distant drums lingering in their ears, or the image of a figure glimpsed in the fog there one moment, gone the next. Some speak of an overwhelming sadness that clings to them long after they leave, as if the dead have brushed against their hearts. If you ever find yourself walking the fields at dawn, when the mist coils low and the world seems hushed, listen closely. You may hear the faint beat of drums, the clatter of ghostly sabers, or the whispered breath of men who fought their final battle on a bitter New Year's Eve. And if shapes begin to move in the fog, silent soldiers patrolling an endless front know that you have stepped into a place where time does not heal all wounds, and where the spirits of Stones River still wait for orders that will never come. The Fredericksburg Battlefield in Virginia stretches along the Rappahannock River, its gentle hills and historic stone walls concealing the memory of one of the most lopsided and devastating battles of the Civil War. In December of 1862, Union forces launched a series of doomed assaults against well-entrenched Confederate troops positioned along the sunken road and behind the stone wall at Marye's Heights. For hours, Union soldiers charged uphill into a hailstorm of musket fire and artillery, only to be cut down by the thousands. By the time darkness fell, more than 12,000 Union troops lay dead or wounded on the frozen ground. Today, the battlefield is a place of remembrance, but for many visitors, it is also a place of restless spirits and lingering echoes of unimaginable suffering. The sunken road, once a simple country lane, became a killing field during the battle. Confederate forces, shielded by the stone wall that bordered the road, unleashed relentless fire on the advancing Union soldiers. The slaughter was so complete that the ground in front of the wall was carpeted with bodies, and the snow turned crimson with blood. The cries of the wounded pierced the cold winter air long after the guns fell silent. Some lay there for days, freezing and bleeding to death, while begging for water that never came. It is here, on this stretch of earth, that many say the echoes of Fredericksburg's horror remain strongest. Visitors walking along the sunken road today often report an uneasy feeling, as though unseen eyes are watching from the shadows. The air feels heavy, thick with a sorrow that time cannot erase. Some claim to hear faint voices drifting on the wind, whispers of commands, muffled cries for help, or the haunting sound of men groaning in agony. On quiet nights, when the battlefield lies shrouded in darkness, these phantom voices become even more pronounced. A few have even heard the distinct ring of musket fire echoing from the hills, followed by the hollow boom of cannons, Though no weapons have stood on these grounds for more than a century, photographs taken near the sunken road often reveal something chilling: faces blurred, translucent, and undeniably human appearing where no one was standing. Paranormal investigators and curious tourists alike have captured these spectral images, their features eerily matching those of Civil War soldiers. Some faces appear twisted in pain, mouths open as if caught in an eternal scream. Others wear expressions of grim determination, their hollow eyes staring across a battlefield that has long since fallen silent. These images have been studied and compared to wartime photographs, and many believe they bear an uncanny resemblance to actual men who fought and died at Fredericksburg. The Fredericksburg Battlefield is not just haunted by sounds and shadows. It is steeped in an energy that seems to cling to certain places. Near the stone wall at Maury's Heights, where the Confederate line stood firm through the slaughter, visitors have felt sudden drops in temperature, even on warm summer days. Cold spots linger in patches of sunlight, and the air grows still and oppressive. Some people report feeling dizzy or nauseated, as if the weight of the past presses down on them. A few have even claimed to see soldiers crouching behind the wall, muskets at the ready, their gray coats tattered and their faces pale as death. The nearby Innes house, which served as a shelter during the battle, is another hotspot for paranormal activity. This modest brick home still bears bullet holes from the fighting, scars that testify to the chaos of that day. Guests touring the house have reported whispers echoing through empty rooms, and more than one has seen fleeting shadows dart across the stairway. There are stories of windows rattling on windless days and doors swinging open on their own, as if unseen hands are still moving through the house. Even the fields themselves seem alive with spectral energy. On misty mornings, when fog curls low across the ground, visitors have described the uncanny sensation of being surrounded by movement shapes, forming and dissolving in the haze, like soldiers marching silently to their fate. One chilling account tells of a man who saw a column of figures advancing through the mist, their bayonets glinting faintly in the dawn light. Believing he had stumbled upon a group of he raised his camera to take a picture only to watch them vanish before his eyes. When he looked at the photo later, faint outlines of soldiers still lingered in the frame. The cries of the wounded are perhaps the most heartbreaking phenomena tied to this battlefield. People walking the grounds after dark have heard sobbing in the distance, soft at first, then rising in pitch until it becomes a desperate wail. Some have even heard men calling for their mothers or begging for water in hoarse, broken voices. These sounds chill the blood because they feel so real, so raw with suffering, that there is no mistaking their origin. They are echoes of lives cut short, of agony that refuses to fade. Why do the spirits of Fredericksburg linger? Some believe it is the sheer scale of the tragedy. Thousands of men died in vain that day, their sacrifice achieving nothing but grief. Many perished far from home, their bodies left in the open for days before burial. Perhaps their souls remain bound to the place of their last breath, reliving their final moments over and over in an endless loop of sorrow and confusion. Others believe the intensity of their emotions, fear, anger, longing, imprinted itself on the land, creating a residual haunting that replays fragments of the battle like a broken record. Whatever the cause, those who visit Fredericksburg often leave with more than photographs and memories. They leave with the weight of history pressing on their hearts, the echo of distant gunfire ringing in their ears, and the image of a face half seen, half imaginally in the fog. And if they walk the sunken road on a still, moonlit night, they may feel the chill of a presence brushing past, or hear a whisper carried on the wind, the voice of a soldier, lost in time, still waiting for an order that will never come. Andersonville Prison, officially known as Camp Sumter, stands as one of the most notorious and harrowing sites of the American Civil War. Located in southwest Georgia, this Confederate prisoner of war camp operated for just 14 months, from February 1864 to April 1865. But in that brief time, nearly 45,000 Union soldiers were imprisoned within its earthen walls, and almost 13,000 of them perished due to starvation, disease, exposure, and abuse. The conditions at Andersonville were so brutal and unforgiving that the name itself has become synonymous with suffering and despair. Even now, over 150 years later, visitors to the site report eerie encounters, dark shadows moving across the grounds, and mournful voices whispering through the night. The prison was hastily constructed to house the swelling numbers of Union prisoners captured by Confederate forces. Andersonville was never designed to be a long-term facility. It was a crude stockade surrounded by a 15-foot-high wooden stockade wall, enclosing roughly 26 acres of swampy, wooded land. There was no shelter for the prisoners except for makeshift tents or lean-tos, leaving them exposed to Georgia's brutal summer heat and winter cold. Sanitation was virtually non-existent, and clean water was scarce. Disease spread rapidly in the overcrowded camp, and starvation was common. The prisoners' diet was meager, often just cornmeal and occasionally a small amount of meat or vegetables. Hunger gnawed relentlessly, and death was ever present. The agony endured by the prisoners is etched into the land itself. Graves dot the nearby hills, marking where thousands were buried in mass graves, often without proper identification or ceremony. The site became a cemetery for the lost souls of men who died far from home, many never to be claimed or remembered by their families. This tragic legacy has left a heavy imprint on the grounds. Visitors often describe an oppressive atmosphere, a tangible weight of sorrow that hangs in the air, as if the earth itself mourns the countless lives cut short. At night, Andersonville's haunting intensifies. Witnesses have reported seeing dark shadows gliding silently across the open fields, figures with no clear form or substance, moving with a slow, deliberate pace. These shadows are sometimes described as wandering the boundaries of the stockade, as if prisoners remain forever trapped behind invisible walls. Camp visitors have felt sudden drops in temperature and unexplained chills, often accompanied by an overwhelming sense of despair and loneliness. Mournful voices are another common phenomenon. Visitors and park staff alike have heard faint whispers carried on the wind, soft, sorrowful sounds that rise and fall, like the cries of men calling for help or comfort. Some claim to hear the distant moans of agony or the quiet sobbing of lost souls unable to find peace. These voices sometimes coalesce into ghostly conversations or cries for water, a desperate plea often heard in accounts from former prisoners who suffered from relentless thirst and dehydration. The sounds are so realistic that they have left listeners shaken and speechless, unable to explain the source. One of the most chilling reports comes from those who walked the remains of the dead line, a boundary inside the prison beyond which prisoners were forbidden to cross. Guards patrolled this line with deadly force, and many who dared to step beyond it were shot on sight. It is said that restless spirits still pace this boundary, trapped between the living world and the afterlife. Witnesses describe fleeting glimpses of prisoners standing at the edge of the dead line, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow, as if awaiting a mercy that never came. Sometimes, these figures vanish when approached, leaving behind only the cold breeze of a ghostly presence. The infamous prison commander, Captain Henry Wers, is another figure said to haunt the grounds. Wers was tried and executed after the war for war crimes related to the horrific conditions at Andersonville. Some believe his restless spirit remains, condemned to roam the camp in eternal torment. Accounts tell of a dark, shadowy man seen near the guardhouse or walking the stockade walls, his presence marked by a sudden drop in temperature and a heavy feeling of dread. Visitors who have encountered this apparition often feel watched, as if judged by a ghostly overseer whose guilt cannot be escaped. Paranormal investigators have visited Andersonville and recorded numerous unexplained phenomena. Electronic voice phenomena. EVP sessions have captured faint voices pleading for help, repeating names, or uttering fragments of conversation from a long-past time. Cameras have caught orbs of light hovering near the old stockade wall and strange mists drifting through the trees. Some investigators claim to have seen full-bodied apparitions in period-appropriate uniforms, wandering the fields or standing silently in rows as if awaiting roll call. Despite its grim history, Andersonville Prison is now a National Historic Site dedicated to honoring those who suffered and died there. The museum and memorials tell the stories of the men who endured unimaginable hardships, and efforts are made to preserve the memory of their sacrifice. But beneath the surface of history lies a darker, lingering presence that many visitors cannot ignore. For those who walk the grounds after dark, the suffering of the past still resonates with powerful intensity. Walking Andersonville at twilight, when the sun sinks below the horizon and shadows lengthen across the open fields, visitors sometimes hear the faint clang of chains or the distant shouts of guards. The air grows thick with a sorrowful silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional whisper of unseen voices. Some swear they have seen prisoners' faces appearing momentarily in the fog, a fleeting glimpse of anguish that disappears as quickly as it comes. Andersonville remains a haunting reminder of the human cost of war, a place where cruelty and desperation intersected with courage and endurance. The spirits said to roam its grounds are not malevolent, but seem trapped in a liminal space between life and death, forever bound to the place of their suffering. Their mournful voices and shadowy forms serve as a chilling testament to a dark chapter in American history, a solemn call to remember the past lest it be repeated. For anyone who visits Andersonville Prison, the experience is more than just a lesson in history. It is an encounter with the echoes of pain and loss that refuse to be silenced. The shadows moving across the grounds, the whispers in the night, and the lingering chill in the air remind us that some places carry scars far deeper than stone and soil. At Andersonville, the past is never truly gone, and the ghosts of suffering men remain, their voices carried on the wind, calling out from the darkness, still waiting for peace. Fort Monroe, located at the strategic entrance to Hampton Roads in Virginia, is a fortress steeped in history and contradictions. Known as Freedom's Fortress for its role as a Union stronghold and refuge for escaped enslaved people during the Civil War, it also harbors dark secrets hidden deep within its ancient walls. Despite its reputation as a symbol of liberty, the fort's dungeons and casemates are said to hold restless spirit soldiers who died in captivity, and perhaps even the elusive ghost of Jefferson Davis, the Confederate president, who was imprisoned there after the war. Visitors and staff alike have reported eerie encounters, unexplained noises, and shadowy figures roaming the vast complex long after the sun sets. Built between 1819 and 1834, Fort Monroe's massive stone walls and imposing bastions were designed to protect the vital Chesapeake Bay and the nearby naval shipyards. During the Civil War, it remained firmly in Union hands, serving as a key military base and a haven for escaped enslaved people who sought refuge behind its walls. It was here that the famous contraband decision was made, effectively declaring freedom for those who reached Union lines. Yet beneath this beacon of hope lay the darker reality of imprisonment and suffering. The fort's casemates' underground vaulted rooms, once used as prison cells, have long been a focal point of paranormal activity. These dungeons housed Confederate prisoners of war, including officers and soldiers captured during the conflict. Conditions were harsh, with cramped quarters, poor ventilation, and minimal light. Many prisoners succumbed to disease and despair within these cold stone walls, and it is said their spirits remain trapped in the casemates, replaying the torment of their confinement. Visitors venturing into the casemates often report a sudden drop in temperature, an icy chill that seeps into their bones regardless of the weather outside. Whispers and distant murmurs are frequently heard, sometimes faint voices calling out names or murmuring prayers in forgotten tongues. Some have experienced an overwhelming sense of sadness or dread, as if the weight of so many lives lost presses down on the air itself. Shadows flit at the edges of vision, and fleeting glimpses of figures dressed in Civil War-era uniforms have been described by those brave enough to explore after dark. One of the most compelling legends centers on the supposed ghost of Jefferson Davis. After the Confederate defeat, Davis was imprisoned at Fort Monroe for 2 years. Though he was treated relatively well compared to others, his time in captivity was undoubtedly fraught with despair and humiliation. Some say his spirit never left the fort, Several witnesses have claimed to see a tall, dignified figure dressed in Confederate gray, wandering the corridors near the casemates. This apparition is said to appear at dusk, sometimes standing silently in the shadows or pacing restlessly as if waiting for a release that never came. The fort's military cemetery and parade grounds are also known for strange occurrences. Soldiers who once trained and lived within the walls are believed to still roam the grounds, their presence felt as cold spots or sudden gusts of wind on calm days. Nighttime visitors have heard the echoing footsteps of marching troops or the distant bugle calls of reveille and retreats. Sounds inexplicably heard when no ceremony is taking place. Campfires flicker where no flames burn, and phantom voices sometimes call out orders or sing old military songs. In one particularly well-documented incident, a group of historians visiting the fort after hours reported hearing chains dragging along the stone floor of the casemates. Investigating the noise, they found no source but were struck by a sudden, oppressive feeling, as if unseen eyes were watching their every move. On another occasion, a security guard on night duty saw the silhouette of a Confederate soldier standing near the old prison cells. The figure vanished when approached, leaving only a cold breeze in its wake. The juxtaposition of Fort Monroe's roles as both a fortress of freedom and a prison of sufferings seems to fuel the paranormal activity there. The hope embodied by the Freedom's fortress is shadowed by the pain and captivity experienced within the same walls. The spirits that linger appear caught between these conflicting histories, unable to find rest or reconciliation. Many who visit Fort Monroe speak of a profound emotional experience, as if the echoes of the past reach out across time. The stories of ghostly soldiers and the possible presence of Jefferson Davis are more than mere folklore. They are reminders of the complex, often painful history that shaped this place. The fort's stones seem to absorb the triumphs and tragedies alike, holding them in a spectral balance. Despite these eerie tales, Fort Monroe remains a beloved historical landmark and a testament to American resilience. Its haunting stories add a layer of mystery and depth that draws visitors eager to connect with the past, whether one believes in ghosts or not. The experiences reported here remind us that history is never truly gone. It lives on in the places where it was made, and sometimes in those who were part of it. For those who wander the grounds after dark, listening to the whispers of the past carried on the sea breeze, Fort Monroe offers more than history. It offers a chance to feel the lingering presence of those who came before, soldiers, prisoners, and perhaps even a former president still walking the halls of freedom's fortress, forever bound to a place that witnessed both suffering and hope. Fort Pulaski, perched on Cockspur Island near Savannah, Georgia, stands as a silent sentinel to a pivotal moment in Civil War history. Built in the early 19th century to protect Savannah's vital port, this imposing brick fortress became the site of one of the war's most significant sieges in April 1862. Union forces unleashed a relentless bombardment with rifled cannons, breaching the fort's walls and signaling a revolution in military engineering and artillery. Yet beyond its historic significance, Fort Pulaski is known for something far darker: ghostly shadows that drift silently across its parade ground, and brick walls that seem to bleed blood-red stains after rain, as if the fortress itself mourns the suffering that unfolded within. The siege of Fort Pulaski was a game-changer. For decades, the fort was thought to be impregnable, its thick brick walls designed to withstand the heaviest attacks. But when Union troops positioned rifled cannons across the river on Tybee Island, they shattered that illusion. Over 30 hours of bombardment left the fort's walls pocked with holes and cracked wide open, forcing the Confederate garrison to surrender. The fall of Fort Pulaski was a devastating blow to the Confederacy, opening Savannah to Union control and marking the decline of traditional masonry fortifications. But the scars left on the fortress tell a story not just of military defeat, but of pain and restless spirits lingering to this day. Visitors to Fort Pulaski often speak of an oppressive atmosphere that clings to the grounds, especially after rainstorms. The fort's iconic red brick, soaked by weather, sometimes appears stained with deep crimson streaks, reminiscent of dried blood seeping from the walls themselves. While these stains are explained by natural mineral deposits and the porous nature of the bricks, many find the visual unsettling, almost as if the fortress itself weeps for the lives lost in its shadow. This eerie appearance has fed countless local legends, suggesting that the very stones hold the memories of soldiers who suffered and died within. The parade ground, once a place of discipline and routine, is another hotspot of paranormal activity. On quiet nights, when the tourists have long departed and the moon casts silver light over the ruins, witnesses have reported seeing shadows drifting across the open expanse. These shapes often move with purpose, like soldiers pacing or gathering in formation, only to vanish without a trace when approached. Some describe the sensation of being watched or followed, an invisible presence lingering just beyond the edge of vision. The feeling is described as both unsettling and sorrowful, as if the ghosts are trapped in an endless loop of duty and despair. Inside the fort, the tunnels and casemates echo with whispered voices and unexplained sounds. Visitors report hearing the faint clang of metal, as if unseen sentries are pacing the corridors, or the distant murmur of conversations in long-forgotten tongues. The eerie quiet is sometimes shattered by sudden noises: a creaking door, a soft footstep, or the whisper of fabric brushing against stone that seem to have no earthly source. Some have felt cold spots that chill the air and their very bones, or experienced sudden drops in temperature as they wander the dim passageways. One particularly chilling story comes from a night tour guide who recounted a personal experience deep within the fort. As she led her group through the narrow, shadow-filled corridors, she suddenly felt a heavy presence behind her. Turning sharply, she saw nothing, but the oppressive feeling remained, pressing on her chest like a physical weight. Moments later, a visitor in her group captured a faint, ghostly figure on camera, translucent form, wearing what appeared to be a Confederate uniform. The photo remains one of the most compelling pieces of evidence of the fort's haunted reputation. The history of suffering within Fort Pulaski extends beyond the siege. After its capture, the Union used the fort as a prison for Confederate soldiers and other prisoners of war. Conditions inside were often harsh, and many men perished from disease, malnutrition, and exposure. Their spirits, some say, remained bound to the fortress, unable to find peace. Echoes of their pain are said to ripple through the walls, manifesting as cold chills, fleeting apparitions, and mournful sounds carried on the sea breeze. Local folklore is rich with tales of ghostly soldiers and restless spirits. One legend speaks of a Confederate officer who was mortally wounded during the bombardment, and is said to appear on stormy nights, wandering the battlements and gazing out toward the water, as if searching for comrades lost at sea. Others tell of phantom footsteps echoing in the dead of night, or of lantern lights bobbing along the parade ground unseen by anyone except those who stay late after dark. The natural surroundings of Fort Pulaski add to its eerie ambience. The islands, marshes, and tidal creeks whisper with the wind, carrying faint, indistinct voices and the rustling of unseen movement. Visitors sometimes report a sudden feeling of isolation. Despite the proximity of civilization, the haunting is not just confined to the stone walls, but extends into the landscape itself, where the line between past and present seems to blur under the moonlight. Paranormal investigators who have explored Fort Pulaski have documented a variety of phenomena. Using electronic equipment, they have recorded unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations, cold spots, and disembodied voices captured during EVP sessions. Some have reported seeing shadow figures on infrared cameras or sensing a presence in empty rooms. These investigations add to the growing body of evidence that Fort Pulaski is more than just a historical relic. It is a place where history's darkest moments continue to resonate in the realm of the supernatural. Yet, despite its haunted reputation, Fort Pulaski remains a treasured historic site, drawing thousands of visitors each year. Its well-preserved ruins tell a vivid story of military innovation, sacrifice, and endurance. The stories of ghosts and shadows add a layer of mystery and poignancy, reminding all who visit that beneath the bricks and mortar lies a deeply human history, one marked by bravery and tragedy, victory and loss. walking the grounds after a rainstorm, when the walls seem to bleed and the island is cloaked in mist. It is easy to imagine the soldiers who once marched here, men caught in the unforgiving tides of war. Their presence lingers like a whisper carried on the breeze, a reminder that Fort Pulaski is not merely a monument to the past, but a living, breathing testament to the souls who lived, fought, and died within its walls. The shadows that drift across the parade ground and the blood-red stains that weep from its bricks are echoes of a story that refuses to be forgotten. Fort Sumter, located on a small island guarding the entrance to Charleston Harbor in South Carolina, holds a unique and somber place in American history. It was here, in April 1861, that the first shots of the Civil War were fired, igniting a conflict that would tear the nation apart for 4 long years. The fort's walls bore the brunt of the Confederate bombardment, and its resilient defenders endured days under relentless fire before surrendering. More than a century and a half later, the echoes of that violent beginning still seem to reverberate through the island's weathered stones. Visitors and guides alike have reported eerie phenomena, phantom footsteps echoing in empty corridors, the faint yet unmistakable scent of gunpowder lingering in the still air, and an atmosphere heavy with the weight of history and unresolved conflict. Fort Sumter's significance is undeniable. Constructed beginning in 1829, this star-shaped masonry fortress was designed to protect Charleston from naval attacks and to secure one of the Southwest's most vital ports. By 1860, tensions between the North and South had escalated to the breaking point, and South Carolina's secession made the fort a flashpoint. When Confederate forces demanded its surrender and were refused, they opened fire on April 12, 1861. The bombardment marked the war's official start and set in motion a devastating conflict. Though the Union garrison held out for 34 hours, they eventually surrendered, leaving behind a shattered but symbolic stronghold. The fort itself suffered significant damage during the siege, with its walls scarred by cannonballs and its interior battered by explosions. The war raged around Charleston for years, but Fort Sumter remained a powerful symbol of resistance and sacrifice. Today, the site stands preserved as a national monument, a solemn reminder of the nation's darkest hours. Yet beneath the surface of history and tourism lies a lingering presence, an unseen shadow cast by the fort's violent origins. Tour guides who have spent years leading visitors through Fort Sumter frequently share accounts of unexplained occurrences. They speak of hearing footsteps echoing softly along the narrow hallways. When no one else is present, these phantom steps, sometimes slow and deliberate, sometimes hurried and anxious, seem to come from soldiers long gone. The acoustics of the stone walls carry these sounds eerily, and the footsteps often seem to fade away just as visitors turn to look. Some guides report feeling sudden chills or an inexplicable heaviness in the air, sensations that intensify in certain parts of the fort, particularly near the powder magazines and old barracks. The smell of gunpowder is another strange and recurring phenomenon reported at Fort Sumter. Despite the passage of more than 160 years and the fort's current status as a peaceful historic site, visitors have caught whiffs of this acrid scent, sometimes sharp and unmistakable, other times faint and fleeting. It often appears suddenly in still moments, when the breeze has died down and the harbor is calm. For many, the smell conjures vivid images of the bombardment, exploding shells, burning timbers, and the chaos of battle. The inexplicable presence of gunpowder smoke in an environment long since cleared of warfare adds to the fort's eerie aura. Beyond the sounds and scents, there are also reports of shadowy figures, glimpsed in peripheral vision, soldiers dressed in the blue or gray uniforms of the Civil War era. These apparitions have been seen standing silently on the ramparts, pacing along the walls, or vanishing through doorways. Witnesses often describe a profound sense of sadness or unfinished business surrounding these figures, as if they are trapped, reliving moments from a time of fear and violence. Some visitors have captured these ghostly images in photographs, mysterious shapes that defy explanation. One particularly chilling story involves the fort's original garrison commander, Major Robert Anderson. Anderson was the Union officer in charge during the siege, and though he survived the bombardment, his legacy is forever tied to Fort Sumter. Some say that his spirit remains on the island, watching over the site where he made history. Visitors have reported feeling an authoritative presence, as if being observed by a stern but protective guardian. Others have heard whispered commands or the soft clinking of military gear near the old command post, sounds that seem to come from nowhere. The eerie phenomena at Fort Sumter are not limited to visitors and guides. Staff members who work on the island have their own experiences. Maintenance crews, security personnel, and historians alike have shared tales of objects moving inexplicably. Lights flickering without cause and unexplained cold spots. Some recount sensing an overwhelming feeling of tension or anticipation, as if the fort itself remembers the moment when history was changed forever. These encounters have fueled numerous investigations by paranormal researchers, many of whom have recorded anomalous electromagnetic readings, ghostly voices on electronic devices, and inexplicable visual anomalies. The juxtaposition of Fort Sumter as both a historic monument and a haunted site adds a compelling dimension to its story. It is a place where the past is palpably present, where the memory of conflict refuses to fade quietly into history. The spirits said to linger here do not appear to be malevolent, but seem bound by the tragedy and gravity of the war's beginning. Their presence serves as a somber reminder of the cost of division and the human lives caught in the crossfire. For those who visit Fort Sumter today, the experience is both educational and haunting. Walking its battered walls, looking out across the harbor where the first volleys rang out, one can almost hear the echoes of muskets and cannons carried on the sea breeze. The stories of phantom footsteps and the ghostly scent of gunpowder enrich the visit. Blending history and mystery into a unique tapestry, they remind us that even in places dedicated to remembrance and peace, the shadows of the past sometimes walk beside us. If you ever find yourself alone in the quiet corridors of Fort Sumter, listen closely. You might hear the faint tread of boots on stone, the soft murmur of voices long silenced, or catch the fleeting scent of gunpowder drifting on the window, haunting reminder that the first shots of a terrible war still echo in the hearts and stones of this storied fortress. Fort Morgan stands on the edge of Mobile Bay in Alabama, a massive brick fortress that once bristled with cannons and echoed with the sounds of war. Completed in 1834, it played a pivotal role during the Civil War, especially in the Battle of Mobile Bay in August 1864, a battle that sealed its fate and left behind an enduring darkness. The fort is now a historic site, its thick walls weathered by salt and time, its tunnels cool and silent. But for those who linger after sunset, the silence does not last. Whispers slither through the archways, screams echo from unseen throats, and ghostly figures march along the ramparts beneath the cold glow of the moon. Fort Morgan may no longer defend the bay, but its restless spirits still keep watch. The Battle of Mobile Bay was one of the most decisive naval engagements of the war. Union Admiral David Farragut launched a daring assault to break the Confederate stronghold and gain control of the bay. It was during this battle that he reportedly uttered his famous command, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." The fight was brutal and unrelenting. Union ships clashed with Confederate forces, while the guns of Fort Morgan roared in defiance. Smoke choked the air, flames leaped skyward, and men fell screaming as iron and fire tore through wood and flesh. By the time the battle ended, the Union had seized control. But the price was steep: dozens of ships damaged, hundreds of lives lost, and the fort battered into submission. That violence left scars deeper than broken walls. Soldiers died in agony within Fort Morgan's tunnels, their cries swallowed by stone. Disease claimed others in the sweltering heat, their bodies buried in shallow graves beneath the Alabama soil. For many, there was no peace in death. They linger still, their presence palpable in the darkened halls. Visitors who step inside the fort after dusk often describe an oppressive weight in the air, as if unseen eyes are watching. Some feel sudden drops in temperature, pockets of icy cold that cling to the skin and raise goose flesh even on summer nights. And then there are the sounds. distant footsteps echoing down empty passageways. The metallic clang of a musket striking stone, the low murmur of voices speaking in tones too faint to understand. The most chilling sounds come from the tunnels. These narrow, brick-lined corridors snake through the fort-like veins, once alive with the movement of men and munitions. Today, they are dark and still until the silence breaks with a scream. Witnesses describe it as sharp, ragged, and full of terror, reverberating through the arches before fading into nothing. Some have heard multiple voices crying out at once, as if reliving the chaos of battle. Others report the pounding of boots racing toward them, only for the sound to stop abruptly, leaving them alone in the darkness. Paranormal investigators who have recorded audio here claim to have captured whispers words like "help," "behind you," and fire snatches of conversation frozen in time. Apparitions are no less common. The most frequent sightings occur along the ramparts, where soldiers once stood guard against enemy attack. On moonlit nights, visitors have seen shadowy figures pacing the walls, their uniforms tattered and their faces obscured. They move with purpose, rifles slung over their shoulders, eyes scanning the horizon as if the war never ended. Some vanish when approached, dissolving like mist into the night. Others linger, watching in silence before fading into the shadows. A few witnesses describe these figures, turning to look at them, revealing faces pale and hollow, eyes dark and bottomless, a sight that chills the soul. Inside the fort, apparitions take other forms. A soldier in a gray uniform has been seen standing near one of the old gun emplacements, his expression solemn, his gaze fixed on the bay. When spoken to, he offers no reply. He simply fades away, leaving behind a sudden chill and the faint scent of gunpowder. In the officers' quarters, visitors have encountered fleeting shapes in doorways, heard the soft rustle of fabric, and even felt the brush of unseen hands against their arms. One former caretaker reported seeing a lantern glow moving slowly along a corridor late at night. Thinking it was a trespasser, he followed the light only to watch it vanish into solid brick. The activity is not limited to sights and sounds. Many guests describe overwhelming feelings of dread or sorrow, as if the fort itself radiates the anguish of those who died within its walls. Some feel compelled to leave without understanding why, their nerves frayed by an unseen presence pressing close. Electronic devices behave strangely, here batteries draining in minutes, cameras refusing to focus, and audio recorders picking up voices that were never heard at the time. One investigator captured a chilling phrase in a deep, gravelly tone: "We hold the line." Another recorded what sounded like a bugle playing taps in the dead of night, though no living musician was present. Theories abound about why Fort Morgan is so haunted. Perhaps it is the sheer violence of its past, the thunder of guns, the screams of the dying, the despair of men who knew they would never go home. Perhaps it is the isolation, the way the fort sits alone at the edge of the sea, its tunnels like open wounds in the earth. Whatever the reason, those who visit after dark rarely forget the experience. They leave with stories etched in their minds, of screams that pierce the silence, of shadowy soldiers pacing under the moon, of whispers curling through the blackness like smoke. Fort Morgan stands today as a monument to history, its brick walls weathered but unbroken, its cannons mute. Yet within its tunnels and along its ramparts, the past stirs, the screams still echo, the footsteps still march, and the spectral sentinels keep their eternal watch. On a still night, when the bay glimmers under silver light and the wind sighs through the arches, listen closely. You may hear the drumbeat of boots on stone, the crack of a musket, or a voice calling from beyond the veil of time. For at Fort Morgan, the war never truly ended. The dead are not done keeping guard. Fort Delaware rises from Peapatch Island in the middle of the Delaware River, a looming sentinel of stone and brick that once served as one of the Civil War's most notorious prison camps. During the war, it was a Union stronghold designed to hold thousands of Confederate prisoners. What began as a military fortification soon became a place of misery and death. Disease, despair, and overcrowding plagued its walls, claiming the lives of hundreds who never made it home. Today, the fort is a state park and a historic site. But those who step inside its echoing halls after sunset find something more than history lingering there. Disembodied voices whisper from the shadows, icy hands reach out from the darkness, and the restless spirits of Fort Delaware make their presence known. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Fort Delaware was intended to defend the river approaches to Philadelphia and Wilmington. But as the conflict escalated, its purpose shifted. Captured Confederate soldiers were ferried to the island and locked away behind its thick granite walls. At its peak, the prison held over 12,000 men, crammed into barracks and makeshift quarters that reeked of sweat, sickness, and fear. Conditions were harsh. The damp air from the river seeped into the fort, bringing with it clouds of mosquitoes. Smallpox, dysentery, and pneumonia spread like wildfire through the ranks of prisoners. Food was scarce, medicine scarcer. Many men perished not by bullet or bayonet, but by slow, wasting illness. Their bodies were buried in shallow graves on the island, their names fading into the fog of time. For some, that fog never lifted. The suffering etched into Fort Delaware seems to have left an imprint, one that time has not erased. Visitors who walk its tunnels and cell blocks often report an overwhelming heaviness in the air, as if the walls themselves remember the cries of the dying, even in broad daylight. The fort exudes a chill that has nothing to do with the river breeze. And when night falls, the atmosphere changes completely. The air grows colder, the silence deeper, and the shadows seem to take on a life of their own. Disembodied voices are among the most common phenomena here. Guests exploring the old prison corridors have heard faint murmurs drifting through the darkness, soft, urgent, and impossible to understand. Sometimes the whispers swell into full words. "Help, over here," or "God, forgive us." These voices often echo from empty cells, their doors hanging open like silent mouths. Guides leading tours have paused mid-sentence when a voice called out behind them, only to turn and find no one there. Some visitors have reported hearing the clank of iron shackles, the scrape of boots on stone, or the hollow ring of a cell door slamming shut in a corridor that stands deserted. But the fort's spirits do not linger as sounds alone. Many who walk its corridors speak of icy hands brushing against their arms or shoulders, cold, clammy touches that make the blood run cold. One woman recalled standing near a cell block when something gripped her hand. She looked down, expecting to see her husband, only to find nothing but air. The chill lingered for minutes, numbing her fingers as though frost had bitten them. Others described the sensation of being tugged backward by an unseen force, or feeling a sudden pressure on the back, as if someone were trying to push them deeper into the darkness. The parade ground, once alive with the tramp of boots and the clamor of drills, is another hotspot for activity. After dusk, glowing orbs have been seen floating above the grass, bobbing gently like lanterns in an invisible hand. These lights drift slowly before vanishing without a trace. Skeptics call them tricks of the eye, but those who have seen them up close know better. Some believe these orbs are the souls of prisoners who still pace the grounds, seeking freedom they never found in life. Inside the officers' quarters, the energy is just as strong. Guests have reported hearing furniture dragging across the floor when the rooms are empty and locked. In one chamber, the distinct sound of boots pacing back and forth often startles those who linger. Paranormal investigators using audio recorders have captured chilling phrases. "They forgot us," "Don't leave me," and "cold." In the kitchen area, voices have been heard humming faint tunes, as if some echo of daily life persists long after death. Perhaps the most unsettling experiences occur in the casemates, the dark, vaulted rooms where cannons once stood and prisoners later slept. These spaces are heavy with dread. Visitors stepping inside often feel an oppressive weight pressing down on their chests, making it hard to breathe. Shadows gather in the corners, thick and impenetrable. Many have reported seeing figures materialize in the gloom. Gaunt men in tattered gray uniforms, their eyes hollow, their faces etched with despair. Some stand motionless, staring into nothing. Others shuffle along the walls, vanishing when approached. A few unlucky souls have looked into a darkened cell and seen a man crouched in the corner, only for him to dissolve into mist as the flashlight beam strikes him. Electronic disturbances are frequent. Cameras malfunction, batteries drain, and flashes of static race across screens. EVP recordings pick up cries, moans, and the sound of weeping, haunting reminders of the misery that once consumed this place. One investigator captured a chilling whisper that said simply, "Stay." Another recorded what sounded like the rattle of chains, followed by a long, drawn-out scream that faded into silence. Why does Fort Delaware remain so haunted? Perhaps it is the sheer concentration of suffering, the despair of men ripped from home, confined in filth, and left to die far from loved ones. Perhaps the restless dead cannot leave because their bodies lie in unmarked graves, their names lost to history. Whatever the reason, the energy of their anguish lingers in every stone, every shadow. Those who visit Fort Delaware after dark speak of leaving with a sense that they were not alone, that unseen eyes watched from the cells, that cold hands reached from the blackness. The fort may be a relic of the past, but its ghosts are very much alive. On stormy nights, when the river churns and lightning flashes across the sky, the voices rise again, calling from the depths of time. If you listen closely, you may hear them, the whispers of prisoners who never escaped, the chill of fingers brushing your skin, the echoes of Fort Delaware's haunted legacy. Fort Donelson, perched above the Cumberland River in Tennessee, is a place where the past seems to breathe through the trees. In February 1862, it became the site of one of the Civil War's most important and bloodiest confrontations. Union forces under Ulysses S. Grant clashed with Confederate defenders in a desperate battle for control of the river. A battle that would change the course of the war. 4 days, cannon fire thundered through the hills, musket balls hissed through the cold winter air, and men fell screaming into the snow. When the smoke cleared, thousands lay dead or dying, and the fort surrendered. But the echoes of that carnage never faded. Today, the land is quiet, to quieten those who wander the old earthworks. After dark, speak of ghostly lantern lights drifting through the woods, lights that vanish when pursued, carried by no living hand. The siege of Fort Donelson began on February 12, 1862. Bitter winter gripped the Tennessee hills, and the frozen ground was soon slick with blood. Confederate forces dug in behind their fortifications, determined to hold the line against Grant's army. For 3 relentless days, the Union launched assault after assault, only to be beaten back by fierce resistance. The hills shook with the roar of cannon fire, the icy air crackled with gunfire, and the snow ran red. Soldiers fought not only the enemy but the biting cold and hunger gnawing at their bellies. Exhaustion hung heavy over the lines as the dead piled up in drifts along the trenches. On February 15th, the Confederates launched a desperate breakout attempt, briefly driving the Union forces back. But confusion and indecision doomed the effort. By the next day, with reinforcements arriving for Grant, the Confederate position was hopeless. Generals debated their fate in a tense council, knowing surrender meant humiliation, but to fight on meant slaughter. At dawn on February 16th, the white flag was raised. Nearly 12,000 Confederate soldiers laid down their arms in one of the first major surrenders of the war. The Union had secured a crucial victory, but the cost in human life was staggering. Hundreds lay dead, and countless more writhed in agony on the frozen ground. For many, the earth at Fort Donelson became their final resting place. Perhaps it is that immense suffering, the fear, the pain, the despair that lingers still among the hills. Visitors who explore the battlefield at night often speak of strange lights glowing in the darkness. They appear suddenly, flickering among the trees like lantern flames swaying in an unseen breeze. Some are pale white, others a warm, golden hue. They move slowly, bobbing gently, as though held by a hand. Witnesses describe watching them glide along the old earthworks or drift down forgotten trails before vanishing without a sound. Skeptics claim these lights are reflections or tricks of the eye, but those who have seen them up close know better. They seem to move with purpose, pausing, turning like sentinels patrolling the ground they died to defend. Many who have tried to follow the lights find themselves disoriented, One man recalled chasing a glowing orb through the trees, certain it was another hiker with a lantern. But as he closed the distance, the light slipped behind a tree and disappeared. When he reached the spot, there was nothing, no path, no footprints, no sound but the whisper of wind through the bare branches. Others report seeing multiple lights moving in formation, as if a column of soldiers still marches under the cover of darkness, their ghostly beacons guiding the way. The lights are not the only signs that the dead of Fort Donelson still walk. Visitors have heard the faint strains of music drifting across the hills at night, snatches of fife and drum, ghostly echoes of a time when the air rang with martial tunes. Some hear the crack of distant gunfire or the low boom of cannon, muffled and far away, yet unmistakable. Guides leading night tours have paused mid-sentence when the sound of marching boots swept over the ground, the steady cadence of men on the move. The footsteps approach, grow louder, then fade into nothingness. Inside the fort itself, the atmosphere is heavy, almost suffocating. The old earthworks cast long, black shadows in the moonlight, and the silence hums with tension. People standing near the river batteries have felt sudden gusts of icy wind, even on calm nights, as if something unseen brushed past them. Others describe an oppressive sensation, like being watched by countless eyes from the darkness. Electronic devices falter here. Cameras freeze, batteries drain, and strange mists bloom in photographs where none were visible at the time. Some of the most chilling encounters occur near the Dover Hotel, where the surrender was signed. Guests and staff have reported phantom footsteps in empty hallways, doors opening and closing on their own, and voices murmuring in rooms long vacated. One former employee claimed to have seen a man in a gray uniform standing at a window, gazing out toward the river. When she spoke, he turned, his face pale and hollow, before fading into thin air. Paranormal investigators have captured unsettling evidence at Fort Donelson: electronic voice phenomena, whispering words like help, cold, and hold the line. Others have recorded sobbing sounds, distant cries of pain, and, once, a hoarse voice that said simply, "Still here." Photographs often reveal strange orbs hovering in the trees, or vaporous shapes that take on the outline of human forms. Thermal cameras pick up cold spots moving through the darkness, shapes colder than the winter air itself. Why do these spirits linger? Perhaps because they died far from home, their dreams and lives cut short in a frozen wilderness. Perhaps because their blood soaked into the earth, binding them to this place of suffering and surrender. Whatever the reason, their presence is undeniable to those who walk these haunted grounds after nightfall. If you visit Fort Donelson on a still winter evening, when the moon hangs low and the frost glitters on the grass, keep your eyes on the tree line. You may see a faint glow kindling in the shadows, a lantern light, swaying gently, moving with a steady, silent rhythm. Follow it if you dare. But be warned, when you reach the spot where it burns, you will find nothing but darkness and the cold certainty that you were never alone. For here, where the river bends and the earth remembers, the dead still keep their watch, their ghostly lanterns flickering in the night. Fort Donelson, perched above the Cumberland River in Tennessee, is a place where history breathes through the trees and whispers from the earth never fade. In February 1862, it became the site of one of the Civil War's most crucial and bloodiest confrontations. Union forces under Ulysses S. Grant clashed fiercely with Confederate defenders in a desperate battle for control of the vital river. For days, cannon fire thundered across the hills, musket balls hissed through the bitter winter air, and men fell screaming into the frozen snow. When the smoke finally cleared, thousands lay dead or dying, and the fort surrendered. Yet, the echoes of that carnage have never left. Today, the battlefield sits quiet to quiet hand. Those who wander its old earthworks after dark often speak of flickering lantern lights, drifting silently through the woods, lights carried by no living hand, vanishing when pursued. The siege of Fort Donelson began on a cold February 12th. Winter's grip was ironclad, with frozen ground soon slicked by blood. Confederate forces entrenched themselves, determined to hold the line against Grant's relentless army. For 3 grueling days, The Union launched assault after assault, only to be met by fierce resistance. The hills shook with booming cannon fire, the icy air crackled with musket shots, and the snow soaked red. Soldiers fought not only the enemy, but the brutal cold and gnawing hunger. Exhaustion weighed heavily, and the dead piled in drifts along the trenches and ravines. On February 15th, the Confederates launched a desperate breakout attempt, temporarily pushing Union forces back. But confusion and indecision doomed the effort. By the next day, reinforcements arrived for Grant, and the Confederate position became hopeless. Generals debated their fate in tense councils, knowing surrender meant humiliation, but continued fighting meant slaughter. At dawn on February 16th, the white flag was raised. Nearly 12,000 Confederate soldiers laid down their arms in one of the earliest and most significant surrenders of the war. The Union had secured a pivotal victory, but the cost in human life was staggering. Hundreds lay dead. Countless more writhed in agony on the frozen ground. For many, Fort Donelson's earth became their final resting place. It is perhaps that immense suffering, the fear, pain, and despair that still lingers among the hills. Visitors who explore the battlefield at night often speak of strange, flickering lights glowing in the darkness. These apparitions appear suddenly, flickering among the trees like lantern flames, swaying in an unseen breeze. Some glow pale white, others a warm, golden hue. They move slowly, bobbing gently as if held by invisible hands. Witnesses describe watching them glide along old earthworks or drift down forgotten trails before vanishing without a sound. Skeptics attribute these lights to reflections or optical illusions. But those who have seen them closely know better. They seem purposeful, pausing, turning as if sentinels patrolling the ground they died to defend. Many who have tried to follow the lights find themselves disoriented. One man recalled chasing a glowing orb through dense woods, certain it was another hiker carrying a lantern. But as he closed the distance, the light slipped behind a tree and vanished. When he reached the spot, there was nothing, no path, no footprints, no sound but the whisper of wind through bare branches. Others report seeing multiple lights moving in formation, as if a column of soldiers still marches under cover of darkness, their ghostly beacons guiding the way. The lights are not the only signs that the dead of Fort Donelson still walk these grounds. Visitors have heard faint strains of music drifting across the hills at night, snatches of fife and drum. Ghostly echoes of a time when martial tunes rang across the air. Some hear distant crackling gunfire or the low boom of cannon, muffled and far away, yet unmistakable. Guides leading night tours have paused mid-sentence when the steady cadence of marching boots sweeps over the ground. The footsteps approach, grow louder, then fade into nothingness. Inside the fort itself, the atmosphere is heavy, almost suffocating. The old earthworks cast long black shadows beneath the moonlight, and the silence hums with tension. People standing near the river batteries have felt sudden gusts of icy wind, even on calm nights, as if something unseen brushed past them. Others describe an oppressive sensation, like being watched by countless unseen eyes from the darkness. Electronic devices falter here. Cameras freeze, batteries drain, and strange mists bloom in photographs when none were visible at the time. Some of the most chilling encounters occur near the Dover Hotel, where the surrender was signed. Guests and staff have reported phantom footsteps in empty hallways, doors opening and closing on their own, and voices murmuring in long-vacated rooms. One former employee claimed to see a man in a gray uniform standing at a window, gazing toward the river. When she spoke, he turned, his face pale and hollow, before fading into thin air. Paranormal investigators have captured unsettling evidence at Fort Donelson. Electronic voice phenomena, whispering words like help, cold, and hold the line. Others have recorded sobbing sounds, distant cries of pain, and once, a hoarse voice that said simply, "Still here." Photographs often reveal strange orbs hovering in the trees or vaporous shapes taking the outline of human forms. Thermal cameras pick up cold spots moving through the darkness, shapes colder than the winter air itself. Why do these spirits linger? Perhaps because they died far from home, their dreams and lives cut short in a frozen wilderness, perhaps because their blood soaked into the earth, binding them forever to this place of suffering and surrender. Whatever the reason, their presence is undeniable to those who walk these haunted grounds after nightfall. If you visit Fort Donelson on a still winter evening, when the moon hangs low and frost glitters on the grass, keep your eyes on the tree line. You may see a faint glow kindling in the shadows, a lantern light, swaying gently, moving with steady, silent rhythm. Follow it if you dare. But be warned, when you reach the spot where it burns, you will find nothing but darkness and the cold certainty that you were never alone. Here, where the river bends and the earth remembers, the dead still keep their watch, their ghostly lanterns flickering in the night. Harper's Ferry, nestled where the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers meet in West Virginia, is a place steeped in history and shadowed by the echoes of war. The town's cobblestone streets and historic buildings stand as silent witnesses to moments that shaped a nation. Yet, beneath the peaceful surface lies a lingering presence, a world where the past refuses to stay buried. Ghostly soldiers are said to march along the old streets, their footsteps soft but unmistakable. And on still, moonlit nights, the spectral tolling of church bells can be heard, ringing out from empty towers when no living hand moves the ropes. The town's strategic location made it a focal point during the Civil War. Harper's Ferry was home to a vital armory and arsenal, coveted by both Union and Confederate forces. Control of this town meant control of weapons and supplies, making it a frequent target and battleground. The most famous event was John Brown's raid in 1859, a bold and bloody attempt to ignite a slave rebellion by seizing the armory. Though Brown's plan failed, the raid heightened tensions and pushed the nation closer to civil war. During the war itself, Harper's Ferry changed hands multiple times. The Union and Confederate armies clashed repeatedly, filling the town and its surrounding hills with the sounds of muskets, cannon, and anguished cries. Soldiers camped along the narrow streets, and battles spilled through the town's historic alleys and riverbanks. Thousands of men marched, fought, and died here. Their blood seeped into the soil, their memories etched into the very stones. Today, visitors strolling through Harper's Ferry often speak of a haunting presence. As the sun dips below the horizon, the town seems to breathe differently. Shadows lengthen and stretch across the cobblestones, and the air grows thick with the weight of history. Many who walk the old streets at night report hearing the rhythmic sound of marching boots echoing off brick and stone. The footsteps come in measured cadence, steady and deliberate, as if an unseen company of soldiers is still on patrol. Witnesses describe the soldiers as ghostly figures, often visible only as faint outlines shimmering in the darkness. Clad in tattered uniforms, some appear to carry muskets or rifles, their faces obscured by the mist. They march in formation, passing silently through the streets, sometimes disappearing into the fog or blending into the shadows of the historic buildings. At times, these apparitions seem unaware of the living, focused solely on their eternal march along the town's ancient pathways. One particularly chilling account comes from a local historian who, while researching late one autumn evening, heard the unmistakable sound of a regiment's march on High Street. Turning, she saw a line of figures moving with military precision, their boots striking the stones in perfect rhythm. She tried to call out, but her voice caught in her throat as the figures faded into the night. Since then, others have reported similar sightings, suggesting that this ghostly procession is a recurring phenomenon tied to the town's turbulent past. The spectral presence is not limited to the soldiers. On some nights, visitors hear the eerie tolling of church bells, resonating through the mist-shrouded streets. The bells ring long and mournful, far past the midnight hour, echoing from the steeples of churches long closed or empty. No one rings them, there are no living bell ringers, and yet the bells peal as if mourning the souls lost in the chaos of war. This phenomenon has baffled locals and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Some suggest the bells are an otherworldly tribute to those who died fighting for control of the town, a spectral funeral toll that never ends. Others believe the tolling serves as a warning or a call to remember the sacrifices made on this hallowed ground. Whatever the meaning, the sound is unmistakable and profoundly unsettling, hanging heavy in the still air like a ghostly lament. Beyond the sounds and visions, Harper's Ferry holds many spots where the veil between past and present feels especially thin. The old Armory building, now a museum, is said to harbor restless spirits. Visitors report cold spots that chill to the bone and fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures watching from dark corners. Some have felt invisible hands brush their skin or tug at their clothing as they move through the exhibits, as if the history itself is reaching out. In the narrow alleys behind the Armory, some have witnessed shadowy forms darting between buildings or heard whispered conversations in languages long forgotten. At dusk, the mist rises from the rivers, curling around lampposts and street signs, cloaking the town in an eerie, timeless haze. Those who linger often find themselves overcome by a sense of melancholy and awe, as if standing at the crossroads of history and the supernatural. Many who visit Harper's Ferry come away with stories that defy explanation. A young couple camping near the river described waking to find an entire line of ghostly soldiers marching silently past their tent, their faces pale and their eyes hollow. An elderly man claimed to have seen John Brown himself, standing stoically near the old firehouse, his gaze fixed on the river, as if waiting for the moment history finally caught up with him. Paranormal investigators who have studied the area report capturing EVP recordings filled with whispered names, urgent calls for help, and the faint strains of martial music drifting through the night air. Thermal cameras detect sudden drops in temperature around the Armory and along the main street, while video footage has captured unexplained orbs and misty shapes that vanish when approached. The town's deep spiritual history and the traumatic events it endured have left a lasting mark, binding the living and the dead in a fragile dance. For some, the hauntings are reminders of a painful past that must never be forgotten. For others, they are warnings or echoes of unfinished business, souls trapped between worlds until their stories are told. If you visit Harper's Ferry after dark, especially on a quiet, misty night, listen closely. You may hear the steady march of boots on cobblestone, the distant peal of ghostly church bells tolling a midnight requiem. Watch for figures drifting silently through the streets, faces blurred by time but eyes full of sorrow and resolve. The past lives here still, woven into the fabric of the town, an eternal procession of memories, shadows, and spectral sounds. Harper's Ferry is more than a historic town. It is a gateway where history and the supernatural converge, a place where the brave and the fallen continue their endless march beneath the watchful stars. Vicksburg Battlefield in Mississippi is a place where history and haunting merge beneath the hot southern sky. Known for its pivotal role in the Civil War, this battlefield was the stage of a grueling siege that lasted for over 40 days in the summer of 1863. Union forces under General Ulysses S. Grant encircled the Confederate stronghold, cutting off supplies and bombarding the city with relentless artillery fire. Thousands of soldiers suffered and died amid the trenches, caves, and hills. Today, the landscape remains scarred by war, and many say the hills still whisper with the voices of those who never left. Ghostly lantern lights drift silently along the old trenches, and shadows appear only to vanish when approached, as if the spirits guarding Vicksburg remain forever vigilant. The siege of Vicksburg began on May 18, 1863, and lasted until July 4th. Confederate soldiers, trapped and outnumbered, endured constant bombardment from Union cannons that shook the earth day and night. The city's defenses were battered and worn, but the men held their ground in a desperate fight for survival. Inside the trenches and makeshift forts, soldiers huddled in the sweltering heat, fearful of the next shell that might tear through their ranks. Food grew scarce, water was contaminated, and disease spread rapidly. Many died not from battle wounds, but from starvation and illness. The siege was brutal and merciless, a test of endurance and will. On July 4th, the Confederate forces surrendered, marking a turning point in the war. The Union's victory at Vicksburg gave them control of the Mississippi River and split the Confederacy in two. But the cost was heavy. Thousands lay dead in shallow graves, their names lost to history. The battlefields became silent memorials. But some say the silence is deceptive. Visitors to Vicksburg Battlefield often speak of a strange stillness that settles over the land, especially as dusk falls. The air seems thick with memory, and the hills themselves seem to murmur faintly with ghostly voices. Some describe hearing whispers on the wind, voices speaking in low tones, as if recounting their last moments or mourning lost comrades. These voices are fleeting, often heard only when the breeze is just right, carrying the soft echoes of a forgotten past. Along the old trenches, ghostly lantern lights are frequently reported. These lights drift slowly through the darkness, bobbing gently as if carried by unseen hands. Some are pale and cold, like flickering will-o'-the-wisps, while others glow with a warmer, amber hue. Witnesses describe watching the lights glide between trees and along the edges of earthen fortifications, appearing and disappearing, as if playing hide-and-seek with those who watch. Skeptics often dismiss these as fireflies or distant car headlights. But many who have seen the lights up close are convinced they are the restless spirits of soldiers still patrolling the battleground. The lights often seem to follow familiar patterns, as if reenacting movements from the siege. Visitors report seeing multiple lights moving in formation, like a small company of troops on patrol or advancing through no man's land. These apparitions rarely linger long enough to be studied, vanishing quickly when approached or photographed. Some believe that these glowing orbs represent the souls of those who fell in the trenches, still guarding the ground they fought so fiercely to defend. Shadows also play a mysterious role in the hauntings at Vicksburg. Many who explore the battlefield after dark report seeing dark shapes moving at the edges of their vision, figures that dissolve or vanish the moment they turn to look directly. These shadows sometimes take on humanoid forms, appearing as soldiers standing silently on the ridges or crouching near the riverbank. They do not approach or threaten. Instead, they seem to watch, eternal sentinels bound to the land. One chilling account comes from a night tour guide who described a sudden encounter near a trench line. While speaking to a group, she felt the temperature drop sharply and noticed a shadow detach itself from the tree line. The figure appeared to be a soldier in a worn gray uniform, standing motionless and staring out over the battlefield. As the guide shone her flashlight, the figure flickered and disappeared into the mist. The group heard faint murmurs, like hushed conversations carried on the wind, leaving them shaken and speechless. Alongside these visual and auditory phenomena, other unexplained experiences have been reported. Visitors and researchers have felt sudden chills, as if icy fingers brushed their skin or invisible hands pressed on their shoulders. Electronic devices often malfunction in certain areas, with cameras losing battery power inexplicably and recorders picking up faint, unintelligible voices or distant cannon fire that no one else hears. In the caves carved into the hillsides, where civilians and soldiers sought shelter from the bombardment, eerie sensations abound. The darkness here is oppressive, and many have reported feelings of unease and dread. Some claim to have heard sobbing or whispered prayers echoing within the rocky chambers. Others have glimpsed shadowy figures moving silently through the narrow passages, vanishing before they can be followed. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site have collected compelling evidence. Audio recordings capture whispers pleading for help or calling out names long lost. Thermal imaging reveals cold spots moving against the warm night air. And video footage shows orbs of light darting through the trees and over the trenches. These findings, combined with countless eyewitness testimonies, paint a picture of a battlefield where the past refuses to rest. Why do these spirits remain? Perhaps it is because so many died in agony and fear, their lives cut short amid the relentless bombardment. Perhaps the land itself is saturated with sorrow and loss, anchoring these souls to their final moments. Whatever the cause, the presence of the dead is unmistakable to those who walk the hills of Vicksburg after dark. For those who visit the battlefield, the experience is often transformative. The beauty of the Mississippi hills contrasts starkly with the tragic history etched into the land. Standing amid the trenches and earthworks, hearing the faint whispers on the wind, and witnessing the ghostly lanterns flickering in the darkness, creates a profound connection to the past. It is a place where the sacrifices of countless soldiers linger as an eternal reminder of war's cost. If you find yourself at Vicksburg Battlefield, when the sun dips below the horizon and shadows lengthen across the hills, pause and listen. You might hear the soft murmur of voices carried on the breeze, or see a faint light bobbing through the trees. Approach with respect, for you are walking among spirits who have guarded this ground for over a century, soldiers bound by duty and memory. Their watch, never ending beneath the whispering hills of Vicksburg. Cold Harbor Battlefield in Virginia is one of the most haunting and tragic sites of the American Civil War. Known for a fierce and deadly battle fought in early June 1864, it was here that thousands of soldiers met their end in a brutal, chaotic assault that became a devastating symbol of war's merciless toll. Before charging into the fray, many men wrote their names on scraps of paper, letters, notes, or simply names scrawled hastily on bits of cloth or paper, hoping that if they fell, someone would know who they were. Today, the tall grass sways where countless lives were lost, and visitors say the battlefield is alive with whispers, voices pleading softly from the past, begging not to be forgotten. The Battle of Cold Harbor began on June 1, 1864, near Mechanicsville, Virginia, during General Ulysses S. Grant's overland campaign against Confederate General Robert E. Lee's forces. After weeks of brutal fighting through the Virginia wilderness, Grant aimed to break through Lee's defenses here with a massive frontal assault. The Confederates, entrenched and prepared, awaited them. What followed was one of the bloodiest and most futile attacks in American military history. Thousands of Union soldiers were ordered to advance across open ground toward well-fortified Confederate lines. The attackers faced a hail of rifle and artillery fire that tore through their ranks. Men fell in waves, some struck down before they even reached the enemy trenches. The ground was soon soaked with blood and littered with the wounded and dead. The assault lasted mere hours, but the cost was staggering. Estimates suggest more than 7,000 Union soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing that day alone. Confederate casualties were far lower, but the price in human life was still terrible. In the moments before the battle, amid the chaos and fear, many soldiers tried to ensure their identity would survive the carnage. Some wrote their names and messages to loved ones on scraps of paper or bits of cloth, tucking them in pockets or tying them to their uniforms. Others scribbled letters to families or wrote brief notes to be found if they did not return. These small tokens were acts of hope and desperation, the last means of holding on to identity and humanity in the face of overwhelming violence. Now, more than a century and a half later, the tall grass of Cold Harbor still grows over the earth where so many fell. The landscape is serene on the surface, with gentle hills, scattered trees, and memorial markers that pay tribute to the fallen. But beneath this peaceful facade, many believe the spirits of those soldiers remain restless, their voices carried softly on the wind. Visitors walking the battlefield at dawn or dusk often report hearing faint whispers drifting through the grasswords and names, soft cries of pain, and mournful pleas. These voices are barely audible, as if carried from a distance or through time itself. Some say they hear soldiers calling out their own names, reciting last messages, or begging for help. Others hear the murmur of conversations frozen in the moment before death, fragments of fear, courage, and despair. One visitor described walking through a dense patch of grass near the Confederate lines at twilight when she suddenly heard a faint voice whisper her name. Startled, she turned but saw only the empty field. Another recounted hearing the rustle of paper and soft voices uttering words like "Remember me" and "Don't forget." Many who experience these phenomena say the battlefield is not just haunted by restless souls, but is alive with memories refusing to fade. The haunting extends beyond auditory experiences. Some have reported fleeting glimpses of figures dressed in tattered gray and blue uniforms moving silently through the tall grass. These apparitions often appear as faint outlines or shadows, barely visible in the fading light. Occasionally, A solitary soldier is seen standing motionless on a ridge or kneeling beside an unseen grave. Witnesses say these spirits do not speak or interact, but seem trapped in an eternal moment, forever waiting. Cold Harbor's haunting is intensified by the sense of futility and tragedy embedded in the battle's history. Unlike other engagements where glory or strategic gain was achieved, Cold Harbor is remembered for its senseless slaughter. Soldiers' last acts of writing their names symbolize the fragility of life and the desperate hope that they might somehow be remembered despite the overwhelming carnage. The earth itself seems to hold this sorrow. Visitors sometimes feel sudden chills, a heavy weight on their chest, or an overwhelming sadness while walking the fields. Electronic devices frequently malfunction near key points, with cameras failing or batteries draining inexplicably. Some have captured strange orbs of light in photographs, small, glowing spheres that move through the grass or hover near monuments. Near the Union lines, where the bloodiest fighting took place, a series of memorial markers stand in tribute to regiments and individual soldiers. Some visitors report feeling a presence beside these stones, as if the men commemorated there still linger. One man recalled laying his hand on a marker when he felt a sudden warmth surge through his body, followed by a whisper that sounded like a thank you. Paranormal investigators visiting Cold Harbor have recorded electronic voice phenomena, EVP, featuring fragmented names, please, and even the word home. Thermal imaging has detected cold spots moving unexpectedly through the grass and woods. Nighttime video footage sometimes reveals shadowy forms darting between trees or standing silently on ridges. Why do these spirits remain bound to Cold Harbor? Perhaps it is the unfinished business of men who died with no chance to say goodbye, who faced a brutal, senseless end with only scraps of paper to tell their stories. Perhaps it is the sorrow soaked into the soil, the collective memory of so many lives abruptly ended. Whatever the cause, the voices in the grass, the fleeting figures, and the whispers on the wind serve as a poignant reminder of the human cost of war. For those who visit Cold Harbor today, walking among the tall grass and silent monuments, the experience can be profound and humbling. It is a place where history is alive, not only in books and plaques, but in the very air. The voices that whisper from the past urge remembrance not only of the battle's strategy or its leaders, but of the ordinary soldiers who gave their lives and the simple scraps of paper they left behind. Desperate to be known and not forgotten. If you find yourself at Cold Harbor Battlefield during the quiet hours of dawn or dusk, listen closely. You may hear a faint voice carried on the breeze, calling a name lost to time, or reciting a hurried farewell. Watch the tall grass as it sways, and perhaps glimpse a shadow moving silently across the field. These are the voices of those who died, airmen who wrote their names on scraps of paper before the battle, now whispering through the grass, begging only that their memories endure. Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia is a place etched deeply into the story of the American Civil War. It was here, on April 9, 1865, that General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant, bringing the long and bloody conflict to a close. The McLean House, a modest brick building in this quiet village, was the setting for this historic moment. But while the war may have ended here, the spirits of those who fought and died still linger, and many visitors report eerie encounters, phantom soldiers appearing inside the McLean House, silently watching through windows late at night. The village of Appomattox was a sleepy rural community when the Confederate and Union armies converged here in the spring of 1865. After years of brutal fighting and staggering losses, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia was exhausted, surrounded, and starving. Recognizing the hopelessness of further resistance, Lee agreed to meet Grant at the McLean House to negotiate the terms of surrender. The agreement marked the beginning of the end for the Confederacy, and a turning point in American history. Yet, despite the relief and hope that surrender brought, the air around Appomattox Courthouse remains heavy with the memories of violence and sacrifice. The McLean House itself, restored as a historic museum, is often described as a place where time feels suspended. Visitors and staff alike report a chilling atmosphere, as if the house holds on to the echoes of that pivotal day and the countless lives altered by the war. Many who visit after dark have reported seeing ghostly figures moving silently within the McLean house. These apparitions often take the form of soldiers dressed in period uniforms, their faces somber and eyes distant. Some appear standing motionless near windows, staring out into the night as if waiting for something or someone. Others are seen pacing the rooms where the surrender terms were signed, their movements slow and deliberate, like echoes replaying a moment long past. One guide shared a story of a late-night cleaning crew who, while working in the McLean house, felt sudden drops in temperature and heard soft footsteps in empty hallways. When they turned to investigate, they saw a figure in a gray Confederate uniform standing quietly near the window. The figure's gaze was fixed outside, and when approached, he vanished without a trace. Similar sightings have been reported by visitors who stayed overnight during special events or reenactments, describing a profound sense of presence and occasional glimpses of shadowy soldiers moving through the rooms. The phenomenon is not limited to visual apparitions. Some have heard the soft clinking of spurs and the faint murmur of voices in the house late at night. Whispers of negotiations, the rustle of paper, and the low hum of solemn conversation seem to drift through the air. On occasion, the quiet is broken by the distant sound of marching footsteps or the faint ring of a bugle call, as if the army itself is still present, gathered beyond the walls. Outside the McLean house, the village is dotted with markers commemorating the surrender and the soldiers who fought in the war. Here, too, the spirits appear restless. Visitors have reported shadowy figures moving between trees or along the old roadways, vanishing when approached. The peaceful fields that once witnessed the end of battle now hold an uneasy stillness, punctuated by the occasional sound of phantom gunfire or the distant echo of cannon fire. Some paranormal investigators who have explored Appomattox Courthouse have recorded unexplained electronic voice phenomena, AVP, capturing faint voices that seem to call out names or repeat phrases related to the surrender. Thermal cameras detect cold spots drifting through the rooms of the McLean house, and video recordings sometimes reveal shadowy orbs or misty shapes that move with purpose. These findings suggest that the spirits here are not mere echoes, but persistent presences tied to this momentous place. Why do these ghosts remain? Perhaps it is the weight of history and the emotions intertwined with the surrender, the mixture of relief, sorrow, regret, and hope. Perhaps it is the countless stories of courage and loss that still cling to the house and village. Whatever the reason, the hauntings at Appomattox Courthouse serve as a poignant reminder that even the end of war cannot erase the memories or the souls of those who lived it. For those who visit Appomattox Courthouse today, the experience often goes beyond history lessons and guided tours. The village and the McLean house offer a glimpse into a past that feels alive and present. Standing in the rooms where Lee and Grant met, watching the sunset over the peaceful Virginia fields, visitors can sense the deep and lingering imprint of that day, the moment when a nation began to heal, even as shadows from the past continue to watch and wait. If you find yourself at Appomattox Courthouse after dark, pay close attention to the quiet moments. Look toward the McLean house windows, and you may see a pale figure silhouetted against the moonlight, a soldier lost in thought, forever tied to the place where war ended. But memories did not fade. The Carter House in Franklin, Tennessee, stands as a solemn reminder of one of the most brutal and blood-soaked battles of the American Civil War. On November 30th, 1864, the Battle of Franklin erupted with devastating ferocity just outside the doors of this historic home. During the fighting, the Carter House basement served as a refuge for the family and local civilians seeking shelter from the relentless artillery and gunfire. But the blood spilled that day stained not only the walls and floors, it stained the very spirit of the house. Visitors and historians alike tell of lingering bloodstains and restless spirits that pace the halls. Trapped in a timeless unrest born of that terrible conflict, the Battle of Franklin was part of the Franklin-Nashville Campaign, a desperate Confederate effort to repel the advancing Union Army under General John M. Schofield. The fighting was fierce and brutal. a close-quarters clash marked by massive frontal assaults, artillery barrages, and hand-to-hand combat. The Carter House, owned by the Carter family, who had lived there for decades, became ground zero during the battle's most intense moments. As cannons roared and bullets tore through the air, the family and neighbors huddled in the basement, praying for safety as the violence raged above. Despite their efforts to shield themselves, the Carter House was caught in the heart of the battlefield. The house itself sustained heavy damage, with walls riddled by bullets and shells. The basement, which offered some protection, was not spared. Either many wounded soldiers were brought inside, turning the shelter into an impromptu field hospital. Blood soaked the floors and walls as medics worked feverishly to tend to the injured amidst the chaos. In the years since, the Carter House has been preserved as a historic site and museum. But the echoes of that fateful day remain palpable. Visitors report a heavy, somber atmosphere that hangs over the property, a weight of sorrow that seems to seep from the very timbers and bricks. The basement, in particular, is a place where the past feels dangerously close, where the horrors of war and the desperation of those seeking refuge still resonate. One of the most haunting aspects of the Carter House is the presence of bloodstains that remain visible on the basement walls and floor. Despite cleaning and preservation efforts, dark, reddish marks persist, reminders of the human suffering that unfolded there. Some believe these stains are more than just physical remnants. They are marks of spiritual trauma, imbued with the pain and fear of those who lived and died in that confined space. The spirits of the fallen are said to linger throughout the house, especially in the basement and the surrounding halls. Numerous eyewitness accounts describe hearing footsteps pacing the floors, soft moans, and unexplained noises that echo through the rooms. Some visitors feel sudden chills or an overwhelming sense of sadness, as if the house itself mourns the lives lost within its walls. Several reports speak of ghostly figures appearing and disappearing along the hallways and in the basement. These apparitions often take the form of soldiers in tattered uniforms, their faces etched with exhaustion and sorrow. Some seem to be reliving the moments before death, haunted by the battle that claimed them. Others appear as blurred shadows, glimpsed fleetingly at the edge of vision. Visitors have told stories of seeing a woman in period dress, believed to be a member of the Carter family or a local civilian, silently moving through the house, her expression one of grief and longing. One particularly chilling account comes from a museum docent who worked late one evening. While closing up, she heard the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps approaching from the basement stairs. Turning, she saw no one, but felt a cold breeze brush past her. Moments later, a faint whisper so soft she barely caught it seemed to call her name. Similar experiences have been reported by visitors during candlelight tours, where the flickering flames cast long shadows and bring the house's haunted history vividly to life. The Carter House's hauntings are not limited to auditory and visual phenomena. Many who spend time there report an oppressive feeling, as if the very air is thick with sorrow and unrest. Some describe sensations of being touched or brushed by unseen hands. Cameras sometimes malfunction or capture strange orbs of light, while electronic devices inexplicably drain their batteries. These strange occurrences have attracted paranormal investigators, who have recorded electronic voice phenomena, whispers of pleas for help, fractured names, and mournful cries, further confirming the house's haunted reputation. Why do the spirits remain bound to the Carter House? It may be the extreme trauma endured within its walls, the terror of bombardment, the agony of wounds, and the desperate struggle to survive. The house was witness to immense suffering and death, a place where life and death met in brutal proximity. The spirits may be caught in that moment, unable to find peace or pass on. For many, the Carter House is more than a historical site. It is a sacred space that honors the memory of those caught in the battle's fury. The hauntings serve as reminders of the human cost of war, the families torn apart, and the lives forever changed. Walking through the rooms, seeing the bullet-riddled walls, and feeling the lingering sorrow brings the past vividly to life. Visitors who come to the Carter House today often leave with a deep respect for the sacrifices made there. Standing in the basement, surrounded by the echoes of prayers and pain. They sense the spirit's still presence, soldiers and civilians alike, pacing the halls in eternal unrest. The house holds their stories and their grief, an unbroken link to a moment in history where courage and tragedy walked hand in hand. If you visit the Carter House in Franklin, Tennessee, especially as twilight descends and the shadows grow long, be prepared for more than a history lesson. The walls may speak in whispers, the floors may echo with footsteps, and the very air may thicken with the presence of souls who lived and died in that basement shelter. Their memories endure, etched in blood and spirit, pacing the halls forever, longing to be remembered. Lee and Grant met in a small parlor of the McLean house. The negotiations were formal, yet heavy with the weight of exhausted armies and shattered hopes. Terms were discussed and finalized, terms that promised peace but also acknowledged defeat. The soldiers outside, the nation watching from afar, and the house itself all bore witness to this pivotal moment. For many, it was the beginning of healing. For others, a moment of mourning. Today, the McLean house stands preserved as a museum, carefully restored to reflect the time of the surrender. Visitors walk through the rooms, guided by stories of that historic day. But many also speak of more mysterious experiences. It is in the quiet hours, when the last tour groups have left and the village falls silent, that the house's eerie nature becomes most apparent. Guests who stay overnight during special events or reenactments often report hearing whispered conversations that seem to come from the very walls. These are not random noises, but distinct voices, soft, formal, and tinged with the gravity of negotiation. Some have heard the rustling of paper, the tap of pens on tables, and murmured phrases that resemble the language of surrender and command. These sounds seem to emanate from the parlor where Lee and Grant met, as if the final terms are being debated once again, a spectral replay of history. Several visitors have described feeling an invisible presence in the room's almost tangible weight, as if the very air carries the emotional burden of that day. Some report a sudden drop in temperature, as if the chill of the past descends unexpectedly. Others have felt the sensation of unseen eyes watching, a sense of being both guest and witness to a moment frozen in time. Sightings of apparitions are less common but no less compelling. On rare occasions, guests have glimpsed shadowy figures in period dress moving silently through the hallways or standing near the windows. One haunting account comes from a night guard who saw a faint figure seated at the table in the parlor, head bowed as if deep in thought. When he approached, the figure vanished, leaving behind only the whisper of a sigh. The sounds and sightings at the McLean house are not limited to human voices and figures. Some visitors have reported hearing the faint echoes of footsteps on creaking floorboards, soft chair movements, and the distant murmur of voices from other parts of the house where no one is present. At times, these noises swell into a chorus, as if the entire household, soldiers, aides, and civilians alike, has returned for one final gathering. Paranormal researchers have taken an interest in the McLean house and have recorded intriguing evidence. Audio devices have captured electronic voice phenomena, EVP, featuring fragments of conversations, words like terms, surrender, and peace, whispered softly but clearly. Thermal cameras detect sudden cold spots moving through the rooms, and video recordings occasionally reveal unexplained orbs or misty shapes drifting in the parlor. Why does the McLean house seem so haunted by this moment in history? Perhaps it is because the surrender was a turning point so monumental that its echoes refuse to fade. The intense emotions of relief, sorrow, exhaustion, and hope are embedded in the very fabric of the house. Unlike battlefields filled with chaos and death, this was a place of transition where enemies met face to face to end conflict and begin reconciliation. The house may hold these powerful feelings like a vessel, replaying the final conversation again and again as a testament to peace born from war. For visitors today, the McLean house offers more than a lesson in history, offers an encounter with the past that feels immediate and alive. Walking through the parlor, one can almost hear the low murmur of generals discussing terms, or the quiet resolve of soldiers accepting their fate. The silence between those murmurs carries a profound weight, a reminder of the cost of division and the hope for unity. If you find yourself in Appomattox Courthouse after dark, lingering near the McLean house, listen closely. You may catch the faint murmur of voices, the rustle of papers, or the soft footfalls of ghosts, replaying the final moments of a war that shaped a nation. These sounds are more than echoes, they are reminders that history is never truly silent, and that some moments, no matter how long ago, continue to speak across the ages. The Civil War may have ended more than 150 years ago, but on these haunted grounds, it never truly stopped. The soldiers who marched, fought, and fell on these fields remain trapped between life and death. Their voices echoing in the dark, their shadows lingering long after the sun has set. Perhaps they're searching for peace, or perhaps they simply want to be remembered. One thing is certain, these places are more than historical sites. They are graveyards of memory, battlegrounds of the soul, where history breathes and the dead still walk. If you ever visit these haunted locations, listen closely. You might hear a distant drumbeat, the clatter of hooves, or the mournful wail of a soldier who never made it home. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey through the most haunted Civil War sites in America. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because there are countless more haunted tales waiting to be told. Until next time, keep your lights low, your curiosity high, and remember, history never dies. It only waits for the dark.